everyone, welcome back to That's Mental and another episode of mental health and the brain. Today we're going to be talking about the prefrontal brain, also known as the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobe. This part of the brain is really unique to us as humans and is a sort of supercomputer, if you want to imagine it that way. It's the champion of adaptation and creativity, and it reaches maturity at 24 years old, which is crazy if you think about it, especially considered to the other parts of the brain that we talked about before, where those parts are defined really early on, like as young as 2 years old. It's related to complex cognitive behavior, personality expression, decision making, and moderating social behavior. And it knows how to organize our thoughts related to experiences that we've had or to our desires. It can differentiate between good and bad, it can think about the future, and it can also think about the impact that a certain decision is going to have and the outcome of that. So it can think both about the future, the outcome of certain decisions, which is quite complex reasoning, as well as organizing things from the past. It also allows you to control your behavior in certain social situations. So let's say you know that it would be completely inappropriate to show up naked in the middle of a work meeting, for example. This part of the brain is what helps you recognize that and control these types of impulses and behaviors in social situations. If you stop to think about everything that I've just said, you may have realized by now that this is an incredibly complex and advanced part of our brain when it comes to everything that it's capable of doing, and in particular compared to the other parts that we talked about before. As always, there's a relationship between this part of our brain and mental health. Like I said in the beginning, this part of the brain is creative and adaptive, two really important words to remember. As you will know, or as you will recognize in yourself, sometimes we can be resistant to change, and this is normal. This is related to our limbic system, and that's because the limbic system is protecting us from threats or perceived threats. Remember how our survival as a species depends on us fitting in and being part of a group? That is exactly what the limbic system is there for. If you remember, both elements of the limbic system relate to our position in the group and how we fit in with the rest of the group. That's why this part of our brain is more resistant to change and is trying to protect us from things that might result in us being outcast. So with that in mind, it makes sense that the limbic system wants us to stay in what is more comfortable to us, what is more known and understood by it, because it can control that situation. By its logic, that will keep us safe. But the crazy thing is that if you stay in this situation, in the status quo, and you don't adapt, your brain might actually think that there's a danger, and it might start sending signals to the reptilian brain telling it that something weird is going on and something stressful is happening, and this is going to trigger the stress response in your body. Now, personally, I find it crazy that this can sort of happen between these different parts of the brain, that they're communicating with one another, and that although there's no apparent threat, because your brain doesn't like the change or something new that's presented to it, it's going to start sending these signals. And as you know, this then activates an entire response in your body, which is responsible for stress, and as we talked about before, is not at all adapted to our modern day sedentary life. With that in mind, what we want is to be able to adapt to change and not trigger this sudden stress response, and be able to somehow work it into our lives or find a way to tell our brain that it's not as bad as it thinks it is. This resistance to change and lack of adaptability can result in us feeling anxious, depressed, to experience low self-esteem, to doubt ourselves, which, if left unchecked, can spiral into other mental health issues. Like I said, if the brain is signaling these responses to the reptilian brain, then it's normal for us to experience these different feelings and symptoms such as anxiety or depression or low self-esteem. But at the end of the day, we know that it's not helpful to us because it just ends up making us feel worse. What we want to do is be able to adapt. In addition, these types of struggles that we may face, such as anxiety or depression, can leave us feeling more irritable, a little bit less patient with those around us, reinforcing the idea or the perception that change is bad for us, that it's something uncomfortable that we don't like, and therefore making us less able to adapt. So what do you need to know when you're in this type of situation, and what do you need to do? The most important thing is to activate your prefrontal cortex. What you want to do is get this part of your brain, which is the more creative and adaptable one, to start working so that it can switch off the stress signals in the rest of the brain, put that part of the brain away for the time being, and let your prefrontal cortex take charge, because this is the adaptable part. When you enter this creative mode and you switch to your prefrontal brain, you're gonna start to feel more calm because you'll be activating a different type of response, which is not concerned so much with survival, but is more concerned with this creative thinking and being open-minded. Now, I hear you guys saying, yes, Emma, that's great, but now stop hitting me with the science because I wanna know how I can do this. And I've got you covered, don't worry. If you think about it, these elements of adaptability are exactly what you need to be able to work on and improve your mental health. Poor mental health can often be related to the context and the environment that we find ourselves in. More often than not, the environment is a contributing factor to our mental health state and how we feel. Let's say that you're depressed, for example. If you're in the middle of a global pandemic like we are now, and if you're locked down, this is gonna really contribute to the feeling of depression and worthlessness and the struggles that you're experiencing and engaging with other people. And that's why adaptability is important. You want to be able to adapt and change to the different situations that you're in without feeling too much stress, too much pressure, and without it very badly affecting your mental health. Now, it's totally normal that that may happen, but the key here is to build on these skills so that you can learn to switch on this part of your brain so that you become more accustomed to thinking creatively about certain situations, and hopefully you're able to pull yourself out of limbic mode and into this more creative mode. So here are a couple of tips and a couple of things you can do to activate that part of your brain. Number one, try and imagine it from someone else's perspective. I know this sounds difficult, but try to really pull yourself out of the situation. Imagine that you were observing it from a distance, you're a spectator, you're someone else. If you were an outsider observing the situation, what would this person say? Second, ask yourself whether you're putting pressure or expectations on yourself and on the situation that are causing undue stress. I know that I am like the number one guilty person for this. This can be a contributing factor to the resistance to change, and it can result in more stress. Imagine, for example, you're about to get a new boss at work, which of itself might be a little bit stressful or concerning to you because the situation is going to change. But imagine that on top of that, you've now put the pressure on yourself because you wanted to get a promotion and you really wanted to get it within the next few months. And now you're really worried, is this new boss going to give you the promotion? How can you make sure that you still get it? Are you going to have to fight for it more, etc.? This is a classic example of adding pressure to the situation. So if you've established the fact that you might be adding pressure to a certain situation, now start thinking of different ways that will help you increase your likelihood of success in this scenario. This will activate your creative thinking, which once again brings you back to the prefrontal brain. Another thing that you can do is just to ask open questions as they relate to the situation. If it's hard for you to do this by yourself, you can do it with a friend. Ask a friend to help you out and ask you very open questions, which means no, yes or no, and no leading questions where you're already expecting an answer. Just open questions that really will help you think about the situation in a different way. One of these in that scenario that I shared about the new boss might be, what do you think you could do to help your boss find out more about who you are? And last but not least, you might even try engaging in a creative activity such as dancing, singing, painting, cooking, whatever it is, if that's available to you in the moment. Now, I know this sounds a bit strange, but the point being here that you really want to activate this creativity and that solicit that part of your brain. So if you can take a break from the situation that's causing you stress, or this element of change that you feel is approaching and making you uncomfortable, and do something else, you might find that whilst you're in that creative moment, an idea might come to you about how you could approach the situation, or it might just make you feel more relaxed and feel completely differently about the situation than you did before when you started the activity. Another interesting thing to remember here is that this doesn't just apply to yourself. Of course, it's really important to have these tools in hand to be able to help yourself get through different situations. But this also applies to the interactions that you have with other people, such as your colleagues and your friends. So imagine if you're in the workplace and you have a colleague who is a little bit resistant to change, or struggling, or not really accepting of a new idea that you've put forward. Think about the fact that what you want to do is activate this person's prefrontal brain. You want to get them into creative mode, you want to get them thinking differently and activate this adaptability. And in order to do that, you can apply some of the techniques that I just shared that you can apply to yourself. For example, asking them open questions. Adaptability and self-awareness can help us change certain conditions in order to feel more at ease. For this part of the brain, really think about working on your creativity and your playfulness. If you think about kids, they approach everything in a very playful way. Things are a game for them. So it's the same thing here. You might feel a little bit out of touch with this aspect of yourself, but it's definitely something that you can work on. Try to approach situations as if they were new and as if you were seeing them for the first time. And remember, just stay curious at all times and try to activate the adaptability of your prefrontal brain. That's it. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more episodes of Mental Health in the Brain. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also to subscribe so that you get notified as soon as I publish a new one. Thanks.